Welcome everyone. My name is Ines Crespo. I'm Research Communications Officer at the Roslin Institute at the University of Edinburgh. And this afternoon session is about unconventional outreach. So we will hear about a range of communications, ways of doing communications. I would like to ask the online audience to keep your mics on mute, please, unless you're asking questions, just to avoid any interference. So our first speaker is Teresa, and I'm really sorry, Teresa, about how I'm going to pronounce your surname after so many years living in Germany, Kirchler. And Teresa works in science communication at Newton Research Source at RM2 at the Technical University of Munich. That's where I used to work before my current job, but we've never met, I don't think. So welcome, Teresa. And Teresa is going to speak about addressing the right target groups with the right offers. Teresa, so the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
All right, so yeah, thank you for your introduction. So I'm unfortunately I wasn't able to join you in person, but I'm now very lucky that I can at least present my talk via the remote access. So yeah, today I will just tell you a bit about the more unconventional science communication activities that we are doing at the Research Neutron Source in Munich. So to give you first an idea where we are located, so we are in Germany in the south next to Munich, and there is our Research Neutron Source, and in our reactor building we are producing, we're generating neutrons for science and industry. Our reactor pool looks like this, and our so like this. The reactor is operated by the Technical University of Munich, and the scientific use takes place within a framework of a cooperation of different scientific institutions, and this cooperation is called the Heinz Meyer-Leibniz Zentrum. So, as probably you also have it like this. I assume that you all have some different target groups that you want to reach with your communication activities. And besides the politicians, official authorities, press agents, and so on, the main groups we want to reach with our more unconventional activities are scientists and users, our students, then younger people, kids, and then the broad public. That means just our neighbors who are interested in what's going on in a research reactor in their neighborhood, and then of course people who are just interested in science. So to refer to the title of my talk, I will present you some examples of our colorful bouquet of science communication activities that we are offering, and which go a bit beyond the traditional channels. So one example here is that we have a collaboration with a large science museum, the German Museum in Munich. We have some interactive models of our scientific instruments. Of course, we are doing social media. We have different channels for different target groups. We offer scientific talks. We have the Mouse Day. This day is pretty famous in Germany because it is a door opening day just for children. But of course, we are also opening our doors for the adults. And then we have some activities that are only especially for young women and girls. And we are also present on career fairs where we want to reach, most of all students. So I won't go into detail into all of these examples because we won't have so much time here, but I will talk a bit about the Mouse Day then the museum collaboration, and as an example on how we also integrate our own scientists in our communication activities, I will tell you a bit about our interactive models and about a science slam that we organized some weeks ago. All right, so Mouse Day is probably a day that almost every child in Germany knows, because it is organized via the most successful children's program on German television. This program is called Sendung mit der Maus, and at this program there are little science stories and knowledge videos, especially for children, and they are together with some nice cartoons with the little elephant and the mouse and the yellow duck, and this exists already for 50 years. It's always broadcasted on Sundays, and I think not only children are watching it, but also families. I also watch it myself, so it is really well known. And this mouse team since 2012 is organizing a Mouse Door Opener Day, and at this day participating institutions can open their doors for children, and they open doors that are normally closed for children. So this is a very unique access for kids, and we are also taking part there now already for the third time. So we already have some experience in organizing a big event like this, because at this day we're inviting more than 70 children to our site. We have them in 3 parallel groups: group with the elephant, group with the duck, and group with the mouse, and at 3 different time slots during a day. And they really get a unique access to our site, because normally children cannot easily enter our neutron source. One challenge in this event is that you really need to adapt this day to children. So this means that you have to have a look to the timing. More than 2 hours is just too long. So we offer it for children between 7 and 13 years. And you really have to adapt your talks, the presentations you're doing. You have to explain complex science in an easy way, so that also children can understand it and enjoy their day in our site. I will just start the video to give you some images how this day looks like. Is the video play? I hope. Okay, yeah. And it's just that you, like I said, it's an event just for children, so everyone gets her own lab coat and so on. So it's really cool. One challenge is also that we don't only have this Mouse Day, but a parallel event that is the open day for parents and adults, because we didn't want them to wait 2 hours for their children and do nothing in that time. So they also can visit our site. But it's an organizational challenge, because we don't want that the groups meet each other. So parents and child are really separated. So these are 2 separate events that we're offering. And it's only possible with teamwork. You really need all the employees, all the staff to contribute, because otherwise it won't be possible. But in the end, it's really worth it. It's much work, but you get some support from the Mouse team. That means that you do not need to do any promotion for this event. It's always booked out very fast. And it's very positive, because as you have seen maybe in the video, we do some life experiments, and in the end everyone gets his ice cream, was self-made, and they're talking about it to their parents and grandparents and friends in school and kindergarten and teachers and so on. So it really has a wide you really can catch many people with this event, not only the children. So it's very positive, and it's always on the fixed date. It's the 3rd of October, which is a holiday in Germany, and this date is already kind of connected to Mouse Day. So another example for more unconventional approach is our cooperation with the Deutsches Museum, the German museum in Munich. And this is one of the largest science museums in the world, with normally around, I would say, I think 1.4 million visitors per year. So they have a new exhibition, atomic physics, and there we have a space where we present ourselves and the research we are doing at our site. And this is a pretty cool thing, but you also need a very long breath for a project like this, because for us it took like more than 10 years from the first idea until the opening of the exhibition, which took place in July. And with changing responsible persons on both sides, it's much about emailing and meeting, and you have to change your ideas and the others have to change their ideas, because you really have to reconcile many different opinions. But now in the end, we are very lucky with the result, because we really want to reach people that otherwise won't get in touch with us with this exhibition, because the Deutsches Museum is very famous. There are people from actually all Germany, all over the world, from far regions coming here. There are kids with their grandparents, school classes. So we really want to reach out also to these communities. It's nice because there are screens, so the information can be adopted and updated regularly. And we also are hoping to create some close collaboration here, so that maybe our idea is that school classes can have one day at the museum and then have one day at our research site. And we are already pretty excited how this will work in the future. So one topic we are dealing a lot with is the question on how we integrate our own scientists in our science communication activities. So one example for this is our interactive models of our scientific instruments. We have two different ones so far. One is 3D printed and one is done with Lego, and they are both handmade. And here you really need high engagement of scientists. They need to have time, and you need people who really have fun with a project like this to break down the very complex instruments to a model like this. And we had some very dedicated PhD students who did this for us. And we really, really are happy that we have these two models, because you really can present hands-on science to people. They can make experiments themselves with these models, and it's more easy like that to present very complex science systems, because they really can have a look and try out themselves how an instrument and the scientific method at our facility works. So we use it for student courses, for girls' days, career fairs, public events. We even did a YouTube video with one of these models to explain our scientific methods. So we use it very, very often. So the second example here on how to integrate scientists would be scientific talks, and in this case a science slam that we organized some weeks ago. It was also for us the first time, but it was really cool. So also here engagement of scientists is vital, and our experience is that for scientific talks it's really worth to have some professional coaching. That means we always try to have something like a third party here, so not us, but we invite someone who is professional in talks, or someone who in this case already did a science slam himself, so just to support our scientists in their preparation. And we also always conduct a test lecture in front of a small audience. And this is very recommendable, because like that, the scientists get feedback from some people, and they also get more confident in their talk. And so this test lecture always improves the talk very much. So in this case of the Science Slam, I will just show you some graphics of the slides we had there. They've been all hand drawn from a scientist who took really her heart in this. It was all about the story of a little neutron called Nobby, who lives in our research neutron source, and who they talked about his life there, who takes about 287 seconds, I think. And it was really cool because the scientists, they achieved to talk about very complex science, but in a very creative ways. And so we could really reach an audience with this talk that otherwise we wouldn't have reached with some very scientific traditional talk. So we even did a video of the live event and put it on YouTube, and there it was also pretty successful. So the work here and cool graphics and the nice story are really worth it to have some nice event. So I think I'm on time, 15 minutes left. If you have any more details, please get in touch. You can also feel free to follow us on our social media channels, where we often post what we are doing in our science communication team. And with you in Manchester, there are also my two colleagues, Anke Görg and Andrea Voigt, and I'm sure that they will also answer every question you have if you get in touch with them.
Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you for keeping to time. So what I would suggest, and I'm suggesting this, but I'm having connection issues and I keep dropping off of Zoom. I don't know why. So I would invite both the online audience and in-person audience to ask questions now, so we can take questions for about 5 minutes or so, and then at the end of all of the talks, we can have more general questions. The online audience can either raise their hands or write the questions in the chat. And again, if my Zoom drops, I'm really sorry for this. Maybe before I see any hands, maybe I can start, because I do have a few questions for you that I'm curious about. So you mentioned that it took you about 10 years to set up the exhibition at the Deutsches Museum. Could you tell us a little bit about that process? How did you decide? What did it look like? Who built it? And
so I'm only working for the Research Neutron Source for like a year, so I wasn't involved in the whole project. But so the idea, it was, I mean, the German museum, it is right now making new exhibitions because it needs to be renovated, and it's already a very long time frame from their perspective, because they need to collect the money and so on, and it already takes much time just because it takes so much time because the German museum and all the organization there is like in a very long-term perspective. So this is one reason, but actually the idea, I think, was of one of our scientific directors 10 years ago, and then we reached out to the German museum and began just the first meetings, and it was clear that we will have the space. And then they there is a team that is called the museum curators, who are then organizing their ideas and the space that will be left. So, and then in the end, if you have the space, you know how much input you can give there. And we had technical support from our operations teams who then got in touch with the people from the museum who are building the models there. So they worked very closely together so that the model in the end is also like realistic. And the texts, they in the German version, they came from us. And then they were like changed from museum staff, and then we changed it again, and in the end the English translation was done by someone else, so there we hadn't anything to say. So it's just taking a long time, I would say, from both sides. Yeah.
Thank you. While we wait for other questions, I have another one, and whether you could expect, as you mentioned, that you provide training for scientists so that they get more confident about taking part in these events. Could you tell us a little bit more about what the training involves and how you set it up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something pretty new, that we are doing something like this, but especially for the public talks, this is really helpful, because often scientists are doing very scientific talks to colleagues, which is very cool, but if they're going to the public, like some talks at the Pint of Science, or at we also had some public talks at the German Museum, or in this case Science Slam, it really needs to be a bit more less complex and more understandable, because many people listening there are not scientists, and for this we have also the support from the Technical University of Munich. There is a center, the communications center, where you can reach out to people who are professional in giving talks and in coaching. And we always try to book someone of them to come and to listen to the test lecture of our scientists if they are planning to give a talk like this. And it's really helpful if this is also someone from the outside and not us, because also we are sometimes very deep into the themes, and if they use some very specific words or something like this, someone from the outer side would recognize that better than someone from our team. So this is always helpful, and if it's especially something like a Science Slam that is very special thing, it's also very helpful if you have someone who already did this, so he can talk about his experiences or her experiences, and support people who are doing this for the first time.
Thank you very much. I think we'll wrap it up there and move on to the other talks, and then we can have time for more questions at the end. Thank you so much, Teresa.
You're welcome.
Now, our next speaker is Jacinta Dilhays, and I apologize, Jacinta, I didn't find more information about your role and affiliation in the app, so I'm sure you tell us. And Jacinta is going to speak about inspiration and engagement through astronomy in Southern Africa.
Okay, hi everyone. Let me just try and see if I can share my screen. Okay, can you see the slideshow playing now?
Yes, we can.
Full screen. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so hi everyone. Sorry.
No, we didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's my own voice feedback. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Jacinta Delhayes. I am a astronomer at the University of Cape Town. And I am one of the two hosts of a podcast called The Cosmic Savannah. So this presentation was meant to be given by my colleague, Dr. Daniel Cunnama, but he's unavailable at the moment, so I'm stepping in for him. So I will just quickly talk about what is a podcast, why do we want to talk about African astronomy and communicate that, what is the Cosmic Savannah and how did we create it, then a few of our outcomes, so our successes, our guests, our listenership and feedback, and about a podcasting boot camp and training that we ran. So who are we? So as I said, I'm Jacinta and I'm an astronomer and a lecturer at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, although I'm physically in Australia at the moment for visa issues. And my colleague Daniel Cunnama is also a professional astronomer. He's now working as the Science Engagement Astronomer at the South African Astronomical Observatory, the SAAO. And so together we are the hosts of this podcast. We sort of started it from a grassroots place and now it's kind of grown up into its own thing. But basically, what is a podcast? It's a series of downloadable audio episodes. So you can see on the right here, there's a little snippet of what our podcast looks like in Apple Podcasts or iTunes. And those episodes are each stored with a podcast hosting company, which then sends it out to what are called podcatchers. So for example, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all of the other ones as well. And you can subscribe to your favorite podcasts, so your favorite channels, such as the Cosmic Savannah, and then you'll get notified when there's a new episode, and you can see an example of 2 episodes there. So it's relatively easy and cheap to produce your own show, and people make podcasts about everything and anything that you could possibly imagine. And the popularity of podcasts is growing by the day. So it's becoming a mainstream method of content consumption. So why do we talk about African astronomy? Well, Africa has pristine dark skies, really incredible skies, which are quite rare in the rest of the world now, and also large radio quiet zones, meaning that you don't have interference from mobile phones, from radio stations, from cars and buildings and all of these things. And so it's a great place to build some of the world's biggest and most powerful telescopes. For example, there is SALT, which is the largest optical telescope in the Southern Hemisphere. That's in South Africa. It's a collaboration of several Southern African nations. There's Meerkat, which is one of the world's most powerful radio telescopes. That's in the Karoo region of South Africa. And that's one of the what we call precursor telescopes leading up to the SKA, the Square Kilometre Array, which I'm sure we'll hear about more from Joe. And you've probably heard about at this conference since it's hosted there at Dodrell Bank, I think. And then there's other telescopes coming up like Hyrax, and HESS is a gamma ray telescope in Namibia. So there's a lot going on, and it's great region for astronomy, and really world-leading telescopes, which is part of the reason why I work there. We try and talk about African astronomy, but a lot of our episodes are South Africa based, simply because that's where we are and that's where we have the most exposure to. So why do we want to communicate African astronomy? Well, partly to challenge Africa's looked at as dark with just poverty, but that's actually really not true. There's a lot of amazing things going on there, and so it's a way to replace Afro-pessimism with Astro-pride, because African astronomy is something that the people of Africa and the whole world can be extremely proud of. And so just letting people know that this kind of groundbreaking stuff is happening on the African continent is really important. And it's also a way to provide diverse and representative role models. And so a podcast can provide the platform to amplify those voices of the diverse and representative role models. Of course, Dan and I are not very representative or diverse, but we try and provide the platform to amplify other people's voices who may not have one. And of course, I don't think this audience needs any convincing of why you want to do science communication. For education, critical thinking, understanding the scientific method, inspiration, and all of the reasons. But why a podcast in particular? So as I mentioned, it's a rapidly growing method of content consumption. I think the fastest growing method. It's free for people to access. It's very easy for them to access globally. It's not a huge data file for downloading because, of course, many people have issues with internet access. And it's COVID friendly. You can just listen by yourself wherever you are. As I said, small files for download. It's audio only, so no visuals. You can listen to it offline and on the go. So I like to listen to podcasts while I'm, driving housework and things like that. So you can kind of multitask rather than having to dedicate time to it. And it can all be done on a quite a small budget you can podcast on. It's a low barrier of entry. You don't need any sort of fancy equipment to get started, and it does though cater to the already engaged public. Someone has to click on your podcast and subscribe to your podcast, and they're not going to do that if they're not already at least a bit interested in science and astronomy. But it's great for really engaging that already engaged public, giving them long form and a thorough understanding without, like, in an interesting way, without getting too lectury. And the interesting thing about podcasting is the emotion, because you can develop a very intimate and personal relationship with your listeners, although it's one way. You obviously don't know them, because it's actually difficult to lie through your voice only, and without any visual cues. And so it's a way to be very genuine and to be able to therefore engage quite personally with your audience, and quite quick to create because there's no visuals. So our podcast, The Cosmic Savannah, it showcases African astronomy. We launched it in April 2019, so it's just over 3 years old. And we discuss all things astronomy and astronomy adjacent, so researchers, discoveries, telescopes, instruments, Indigenous astronomy, outreach, etc. Podcasting is a relatively small scene in Africa, getting a bit bigger in South Africa slowly. There's quite a large scene in, I think it is Nigeria, but nothing as big as in the UK and the US and Australia, for example. But that's good. That also means that there's, a lot of niches to fill. And so that we tried to fill one of those niches. Our target audience is the general public, probably late high school and above and later. We prioritize the South African and African international public, South African and African public, and then the broader international public, which you'll see we actually do have quite a large following of. And it's available on all of the podcatchers, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, any podcast apps. So the format of our podcast is we have fortnightly episodes, which are each about half an hour to an hour long. We'd love to publish weekly, but we just don't really have the capacity. Dan and I just do this kind of, it's not really part of our jobs per se. We kind of do it off our own back. So making time can be a little difficult. Our seasons are about 13 episodes, although our latest one was 20. We usually have 1 to 2 guests per episode, and we've pre-recorded their interviews. Dan and I then record like an intro where we discuss what topic is coming up, a little bit of an explanation of it, description of our guest. We go into the interview, and then we record our outro at the end, sort of our impressions of it and other comments. We create full show notes for each episode, which I'll put on our website. And we create full static and scrolling transcriptions, and that's to be inclusive to an audience who maybe doesn't have English as a first language, so you can read along, or has hearing difficulties. So I might be able to play this and you might be able to hear the audio.
Welcome to the Cosmic Savannah with Dr. Jacinta Delhaze.
And Dr. Daniel Kadama. Each episode, we'll be giving you a behind-the-scenes look at world-class astronomy and astrophysics and the African skies.
Let us introduce you to the people involved, the technology we use, exciting work we do, and fascinating discoveries we make.
Sit back and relax as we take you on a safari through the skies.
Okay, so that was sort of heavily background subtracted audio. I don't know what happened there, but you can see what's on our website with the static and the scrolling transcriptions and the show notes and the pictures and things like that. We also put our episode onto a YouTube channel with no visuals, just our logo, but with proper subtitles on, so that YouTube can actually auto translate it to different languages, so that those who don't have English as a first language can also hopefully follow on along with something that's semi-decently translated. Okay, so how did we get started? Sorry. No one said anything. Okay. How did we get started? We basically just kind of taught ourselves and Googled how to make a podcast with YouTube videos. And we were mostly self-funded, but as I said, it's a relatively small barrier to entry. All you really need is a USB microphone and you're away. But we did get a small equipment grant from the National Research Foundation in South Africa, which we bought our recorder, which you can see here, and some equipment. And now we're funded by SASTA, which is the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement. We have a studio space at the observatory, which is just a tiny little room with foam on the walls and a desk. But since 2020, we've just been doing it in blanket forts at home via Zoom for obvious reasons. And so we started off, we bought this Zoom H6 handy recorder, which is awesome. And that plugs into these two dynamic microphones with stands and these pop filters to get rid of the plosives. And you need really good headphones. And that's a really good quality sound right there. And you can do it with a lot less as well. So our workflow is we first interview guests, then Dan and I record our intro and outro to the episode. We commissioned a bit of music we made for the intro. And for seasons 1 to 3, I did all the editing with from some free software called Audacity. And then we used something called Descript, which we got a subscription to, which is very nice. But for season 4, we managed to hire a professional audio editor, which reduced the amount of time massively for our workload. We then upload the episode to our Blueberry hosting platform, which comes with a free WordPress website, and then that automatically distributes it to all the podcatchers, so Apple, iTunes, and Spotify, etc. The transcription, we AI generate that using this Descript software, and a couple of Dan interns correct the transcript for all of the technical terms. And then we can generate audiograms with Descript, such as this one here.
Astronomy is a relatively new field of study in Uganda, but the efforts to develop it have been ongoing for about 10 years or more. So there is a community that is...
So we can generate as many of those as we want for each episode. And then we have an amazing social media manager who is a PhD student called Sumari Hatting. And then she makes these lovely posts for our social media and posts the audiogram and things, which is a lot more advanced than any social media Dan and I were doing. So that she does a wonderful job. And then our outcomes, so far we've produced 4 seasons of 54 episodes and 8 mini episodes, more than 40 hours of content. We try and spotlight important causes and issues with a tie into astronomy, such as ethnoastronomy, women and girls in astronomy, mental health and science and academia, conservation and climate action, etc. And we've had interest from a wide range of areas, so Astronomers Without Borders, from artists, authors, radio stations, TV that want to use sort of excerpts of our podcasts or quotes, which is great. And yeah, last year we got buy-in from the government to fund this, which was a huge relief and great. And we were finalists last year for the South African Science Oscars, Science Awards, for the Communication Award, which was great.
Jacinta, I think we lost you there. We can't hear anymore.
Okay. Okay, now?
Yes, it seems to be working now.
Okay. Did you hear all of this slide?
Yes, it was just when you moved to the next slide that we stopped hearing you.
Okay. So you can see here, see here the, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. You can see here all of the countries that have, we've got listeners in. So we've had more than 46,000 downloads just from our podcast directly from 144 countries. Interestingly, the most from the US and then from South Africa. That's just because the US have a really large podcasting community, or community who listen to podcasts. And we've been in the top 10 ranking in astronomy podcasts in South Africa, the USA, and Australia several times, which is really nice. And we get republished onto another podcast based in the US called 365 Days of Astronomy, and they have about 4,000 downloads per episode. So in total, we think we've had about 150,000 downloads, but it's actually quite hard to track. Statistics of podcasts are really, really difficult to track, which can make it a bit hard for reporting. But in general, we're really happy with this listenership. I know that there's other kind of, it's still on the lower end, but quite a niche topic. I think that's quite good. We've had 93 guests, which is awesome. 46% women, 51% Black or of color. We don't set any targets or anything. We just try and interview as diverse range of people as possible, and it kind of comes out like this. 78% of those are based in Africa or African. And we have a whole range of levels from learners, from school students to professors, and as diverse a range of research areas as possible. And then one other thing we've done that has been great is to run a podcasting boot camp. So it was been virtual training in science communication and podcasting. So it covered science communication basics, podcasting technical basics, and then how to interview, host, edit, create show notes, and do advertising. So the first one we ran was for 10 astronomy postgraduate students in South Africa, and you can see them here. There were 7 2-hour sessions spread over a couple of months, and they ended up producing their own mini episodes, and 8 of those were officially published on the Cosmic Savannah. And the second one we ran was for SASTA, who is our funders, and that was recently. We ran this for 60 scientists in South Africa from a whole range of sciences, not just astronomy. We've done one of the 3-hour sessions. We're about to do the second now, and the goal is for the scientists to produce mini episodes on whatever science topic they want, and we might be able to publish some of those Cosmic Savannah as well. And so this has been really great for knowledge transfer, sustainability of podcasting and science and communication in Africa, getting a diverse range of voices to your audience, great exposure for the students, who then end up being trained volunteers for us, and get to upskill scientists and help to train scientists in science communication, which has been great. Here are some of the mini episodes that the produced, and this is Maria Hatting, our shout out to her, she's our excellent social media manager. So I won't go through all the listener feedback just for time, but we've had some really lovely feedback. The students said that we reignited their passion for science. An elder person said that we stretched their mind a bit and kept them company during COVID. And yeah, just some really nice feedback from our listeners, which is great. Although we really don't know who our listeners are, it's very difficult to get any demographic information there. So we just have to trust that people are out there listening. That's pretty much it. So if you have any other questions or you want to contact us later, please feel free. Here's our email address and my personal email address and Dan's, and you can also find us on Twitter. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. I was so fascinated by your presentation that I didn't realize until you said it that you ran over time. But we still have some time for questions, and everyone is welcome to ask questions. I have to admit that your presentation was very, very complete, and you I had a few questions, and you kept answering them. So thank you for that. I really like the name, and I can see the connection to what the podcast is about. Could you tell us a little bit how you went about deciding what to call it?
Oh my goodness, it was a long process of just having no idea what to call it, and we knew it was so important, and we were thinking, you know, the astronomy safari, and we're like, no, that's not it. And then we just wanted to have a word that was about astronomy and about something typical African, but not cliche. And so we were really happy when we finally stumbled upon the cosmic savannah, and we just knew immediately that's it. But it was just random brainstorming.
Thank you. And so how do scientists react when you invite them to interview them? Like, is it hard to convince them?
That's a good question. Actually, most people are very enthusiastic, especially the students. Some of them are a bit nervous, and so we kind of take them through like some short science communication coaching before we start. And we also assure them that we edit, so none of it is live, and we do lots of editing, so we'll always make them sound good, and that sort of puts people at ease a bit. Dan and I are also fairly good at asking questions in a way that will help them to understand the level that we're going for, and we will stop them and ask them to kind of do it again if we think it's getting too high level. But what's really helpful is when Dan and I do our intro bit at the start, then we can define any terms that were used that weren't kind of explained during the interview. But since we've become a bit more well-known in South Africa, a lot of the times now, it's actually people are like quite excited to be asked by us to be interviewed, which is really great. So there's been no lack of interest and enthusiasm. So the astronomy community has been awesome and really gotten behind us, which has been really great.
Fantastic. Do you give them the questions in advance?
Not really, which really annoys a lot of them, which is understandable. So we kind of, if they really would like, we send them a few kind of general questions, but we really want the interviews to be as much of a genuine conversation as possible. And so we really want to avoid the kind of canned answer part. And so we ask our interviewees to sort of talk about how it felt when they found whatever discovery. So Dan and I will generally have an idea of the overarching like narrative that we want for the story, but sometimes we go into it completely blind and we don't even know what the guest researches, and so we have to kind of cobble it along together as we go. But especially for the more nervous or the less experienced guests, we will send some answers. But once we tell people that we don't want the canned answer, they usually do actually relax and enjoy it a lot more.
Fantastic, thank you. I wish I had more of a radio voice so I could do a podcast as well. Thank you so much. We move on now to the next presentation. And that is by Joe, who is sitting here next to me, Joe Diamond. He's a Communications and Outreach Officer here at SKO. And he's going to speak about Mega Science Exhibition and Outreach, is that right?
That's right, and I'm going to be co-presenting with Professor Yashwant Gupta. So he's the Director of the National Centre for Radio Astronomy, which is the Tata Institute for Fundamental Research at Pune, India as well. So I want to welcome him as well. So I hope you can hear us, Yashwant.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, okay, very well.
All right, so I'll just share my screen. Hopefully everyone online can see this as well. So yeah, so we're going to talk about today what's called the SK activities in the Vigyan Samagam. So a mega science exhibit and outreach program in India, and it's being presented again by me and Yashwant, as I just mentioned. So what is Vigyan Samagam? So it's what was known as a multi-venue mega science exhibit that was bringing together a lot of collaborative mega science projects under one roof. So this was coordinated by the Indian Department of Atomic Energy, the Department of Science and Technology, and the National Council of Science Museums. So its main aim was to bring mega science closer to the society in India, and to showcase India's contribution to some of these massive international collaborations that's taking place around the globe. So it was a first of its kind of exhibit. It was set up in a caravan mode across 4 cities, and I'll mention more about the cities in a moment. And the mission was to act as a kind of like a catalyst to further to engage and inspire students, but also the public as well, whilst also strengthening the bonds between these international collaborations who've all worked together on this project, as well as the local Indian institutions, as well as the national Indian institutions. So these were the 7 projects involved. So you had the Indian TMT, you had CERN, ITER, you had FAIR, which is the facility for anti-proton and ion research. You have ENO, which is the Indian-based neutrino observatory, ourselves, and LIGO with their India station as well. So what was the scope and challenge for us at the SKA? So we were exhibiting in one venue each time in 4 cities, which had thousands of people daily visiting these venues, each coming in with their own regional dialects. And so doing this on this kind of scale was quite complex. So we had to try and design this touring exhibit to have activities that were not only easily readapted, but for each city, but could also be easily transferable from each city in this caravan mode. So from a physical exhibit, which we had a lot of materials for, to materials and information for all the volunteers in each city, as well as trying to help us deliver our message to the public and to everyone else who visited. So the 4 venues that we visited was Mumbai. So that was between May and July of 2019. Then I went on to Bengaluru from July to September, then to Kolkata, and then finally ended in New Delhi. And here's some images of those venues when they were set up. So pretty massive venues, and I said the footfall traffic that they're getting in there was extreme. So when we thought about the design, so Yashwant and his team came to me to try and help develop an exhibit that was not only inspiring for everyone going, but was simple and easily changeable on the fly. I was also trying to stay true to our core messages, delivering the SKA and also the astronomy kind of message. So the various information we had displayed was videos to imagery of our telescopes, to descriptions and imagery of the science and location and who else was involved, and especially highlighting India's role in SKA and the institutes involved in that. And then we had some more amazing facts as well to better try and inspire the younger younger public and kids who are going about astronomy in SKA. And we also want to try and add another component that was visually quite exciting. So my colleagues in India created 3 movable models, and you would have seen some today in the SKA foyer. They do move, we just haven't plugged them in. But this was the design concepts that we came up with, these panel systems just describing those core messages. So I'll hand over to Yashwant now, who's going to talk about how we made it all happen, really, in the more specific details.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Joe. And so what I'll just give is a broad overview of the main strategies that we adopted. And first was, of course, to choose the venues in each city. But as you can see, these are very large exhibition, and we needed really to find the right places which had the appropriate infrastructure And we chose to find places where there are synergies with existing facilities, for example, places where there's an existing museum or a science center, and have cooperation with the authorities there to make the best use of available resources. So as you can see on the map here, the 4 cities where we had the exhibition, and it's not a coincidence that the National Council of Science Museums has major centers in all the 4 cities with the headquarters in Kolkata. So the partnership with the Council of Science Museums of the country was a great idea, and it proved a great benefit because they're experts in making a lot of these exhibits and experts in how to manage these, and we had a great relationship working with them. The other thing that we did was, of course, to involve all the stakeholders in the country who are part of the mega project activity. And for the SKA, that was the SKA India Consortium, which is a consortium today of about 20 different institutions in the country that are interested in the SKA and are working together to make things happen for India and the SKA. And so that was a partnership that brought together all the interested parties in the SKA in the country. And the management team went in for a very widespread publicity. There was a very nice glossy brochure produced talking about the entire Vigyan Samagam. And there were many catchy illustrations. So you see one of these. This was a poster where the artist tried to, with some liberty, to show the evolution of the universe as captured by the different mega science projects that were being talked about. So you will see the SKA placed in the appropriate location, the 30-meter telescope, the gravitational wave detector, and so on. So there was this was an interesting way to get the attention of the general audience. And of course, there was a lot of advertisement and publicity in the print and social media. And then there was a high-profile inauguration event at each venue. So as you would have seen, the exhibition was at each venue for 2 months. And so it was kicked off with a kickoff inauguration event where very high-profile people, both scientists and technocrats, were invited. And that is something that always catches the attention of the general public. And then additional thing that was done was that during the 8 weeks that the exhibition was at any one venue, each of these mega projects were given 1 week for more detailed activities that they could have to further showcase their project. So we had a SKA week at each of the 4 locations, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. And there was a lot of engagement with the local institutions, whether it be the local science research institutions or the universities and the colleges. And from there, we drew upon a dedicated group of volunteers coming from the college students. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. The other unique thing that was added here, knowing that many of these mega projects use a lot of the talent and the resources from the industry, that there was participation from Indian industries that was encouraged in all of these venues to whatever extent was possible. So Joe, if you could move to the next slide, please. So the exhibit that Joe showed resulted in this kind of a pavilion. This is what we call the SKA pavilion. So you can see that presentation of the material which covers the SKA, as well as the growth of radio astronomy in the country and what the country is doing as part of its contribution to the SKA. So this turned out to be a very beautiful exhibit crafted by the Science Museum team. And you can see that we had an option to run a video display. So that little black thing there is actually a video monitor. And when this was live, we were running videos, both made at the SKO and those developed locally in India. And we had an interactive kiosk, which you can just about make out here in the corner, where there was information that the visitor could scroll through and interactively go back and forth, ask specific questions and get answers to them. And we had models of antennas and telescopes, most of them working models where you could press a button and the antenna would rotate and do things. So if you can go to the next slide, please. And as I talked about the inauguration event, these are very high-profile events where a lot of the top-notch scientists from the country, as well as the members from the ministries who are involved in the three departments that were talked about in the beginning, were invited. And we also had a good number of dignitaries from abroad. So this is the Director General of CERN at our SKA pavilion. Then diplomats, people from the embassies. So this is a gentleman from the UK embassy visiting, and then the ministers. So our Minister of Science and Technology visiting the SKA pavilion and learning about SKA and India radio astronomy firsthand. We move to the next slide, please. And then it was the audience, because that really was the final target. And we had audience from all walks of life at all the cities. And you can see samples of the crowds here, audiences from all age groups, of which, of course, the most interesting was the youngest, the crowd from the schools and the colleges, and they turned up in large numbers. They were really most excited and enthusiastic. So we had a total footfall of about 150,000 people at each venue over the 8 weeks. So the order of a few thousand people per day on an average visiting at each of the locations. If you go to the next slide, please. We wouldn't have been able to pull this off without this dedicated set of volunteers, which were there to man the pavilions every day. And the volunteers came from the institutions which were part of the SK India Consortium, as well as from the local colleges and universities in that area around the city where the exhibition was at that moment. And there was a lot of outreach done to attract the attention of the college students. And of course, we were worried that many of them, especially the ones coming from the institutes not affiliated with SK India, would not know much about what to cover. And so we had training courses, training programs, somewhat like crash courses for the volunteers to get them up to speed. And actually it turned out that they did an excellent job in both capturing what is the essence and then transmitting it to the audience, whether it be senior citizens or it be the young school kids. And so we had groups of 3 to 4 volunteers signed up for 1 week long duty, and then we cycled through a set of volunteers to cover the entire 8 weeks at each venue. And what was really heartening is to hear from them that how enriching and exciting the experience was for them. Like I said, some of them were not very familiar with astronomy or radio astronomy or the SKA, but we had a lot of people converted and stout fans of what we do. Go to the next slide, please. And so the most intense part of the activity was that week that was given to each project. So we had these 4 SKA weeks, and these were really very busy weeks. You can see a sample of the program assembled for one of the SK weeks. I think this was the one at Mumbai. And it was really packed with all kinds of talks, presentations, a lot of hands-on activities, quizzes, competitions, which especially the younger generation were able to participate in. And so you can see examples of talks with quizzes, the actual quiz for the school students going on, and some extra exhibits that we put. So this is a model of the GMRT array scaled to fit in this kind of area, along with posters talking about it, a model showing a rotating neutron star and how the signal from that is picked up by the antenna, and you can actually finally see pulses on a display. So this is interesting little demos to get the general audience interested in the kind of things that we do. If you go on to the next slide, please. And so finally, all this turned out to be a very interactive experience. And you can see from some of these slides here, so these working models were a great hit. So both the youngsters and even the older people were very curious about how these things work and what do we do with them. This is a snapshot from the kiosk where you could query and get information. This is another, the GMRT scale model that I talked about. And really the interaction, as you can see here, the throng of children wanting to know more and ask questions, and the volunteer doing their best to explain to them. If you go to the next slide, there were a lot of hands-on activity. So there's a group that made a small do-it-yourself radio antenna kit, and that was a big hit where the senior high school and college students trying their hand to build the kits. There was also things for the youngsters. We just put up a whiteboard where generally we would welcome visitors, and then we soon found that the volunteers were using it to explain some of the concepts, and then we found that the children were putting their own ideas about what they had seen and what they had understood from the exhibition. And the other interesting thing we did was to put a feedback, visitors' feedback book at each venue, just to see what the visitors found or thought about the whole event. And we were surprised at how many entries we got and from people visiting. And you can see here, not just in English, but in the local dialect, people giving their comments and saying that this was an eye-opener for them, that they did not know that such things were going on in the world of astronomy, and that there were things happening in the country where the country was doing things as well as contributing to the large international project. So all of this was very heartening to see. If we go to the next slide, which I think may be the last one or the second last. So it was really a major team effort. There was a very fruitful collaboration with the SKO team and the SK India team. And we had visits from the SK Director General, the Science Director, and the head of the communications team coming, giving talks at the venues and interacting with the people who were visiting. And of course, as Joe mentioned, a lot of the work done by the communications and outreach team to design those layouts, which were finally built, constructed in India, because they needed both English and local language translation to be put there. And there was a synergy with working with the SK India team members. So lots of people who contributed, industry partners who worked with us. And last but not the least, the person who was the main driver, Arun Srivastav, who conceived of the whole idea and pushed this to make it a reality. He is really somebody to thank. Unfortunately, he passed away about a year ago. He was also India's representative on the SKA board, so very much coupled. So he was from the ministry, but a person very strongly coupled, and then people like that make a significant difference to how we can, what all we can do to reach out to the community. So I think the last slide is just a summary and takeaway points, which I won't really read. There are things that we've already talked about. And I'll stop here, and both Joe and I can take questions.
Thank you both. This is very impressive. And again, I invite everyone to ask questions both online and here. Maybe I can start. So that was a lot of logos you showed at the beginning.
Yes.
So how did you go about deciding what to feature while pleasing everyone? And who decided it? Was it the comms team? Was it the directors of the institutions? How did that all work?
I think I'll let Yashwant answer that, since he was quite.
If you're referring to if you're referring to the logos of the different mega projects.
I mean, how did you decide what to feature in the exhibits? So
the projects or the areas of science which were to be featured were decided by a high-level committee. It was primarily driven by picking areas where India is participating and active, so that we can communicate to the general public about India's participation in large projects. So each of those projects, whether it is the 30-meter optical telescope or our own SKO, or for example, LIGO India, they each had their own pavilion, and it was run just like we ran ours in a collaboration between SK India and SKO main office. They had groups there which were managing and running those different pavilions for the other projects.
Fantastic, thank you. How did you promote it? So that's a lot of people you managed to attract.
Right. So as I mentioned, there was a few different things. There was a very aggressive publicity campaign, which went via the print media and the social media. And what was done to make it more attractive were some of the more catchy sort of things that were made. There was a very nice brochure made to advertise the event. And as you saw, there was illustration of the whole evolution of the universe from the Big Bang to the present day, to capture that as to how the different projects address different aspects of the universe. So there were imaginative ideas like that which were made, and then these were the symbols that were used in this dissemination over the different media to attract a lot of the general public. And then finally it was the local colleges and the universities. We reached out to the institutions there to advertise, and then to the schools in the areas.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, we have a question here.
I just wanted to know how long the project took to put together and how long it ran for.
Yeah. So that's a good question. So how long it ran for is, as I mentioned, that there were it was there for 2 months at each of the venue, and it ended just before the pandemic. But there was a discussion ongoing as to whether it can find a permanent place in one of the museums in India where it can be there for all times. And the planning for it took something like about 6 months or a bit more. I remember the first meeting of the organizing committee, and from there to the first kickoff event in Mumbai was about 6 to 8 months.
Thank you. So we have only 2 minutes left. So I would suggest to wrap up. I have a final question to all of the speakers, and maybe the two of you can coordinate who answers it. So in about 30 seconds, if you were to give a top tip about to someone who would like to embark in a project like yours, what would that be?
I think from my end, it'd be building a good team of volunteers. So as we mentioned in the talk, they were really the backbone of how we succeeded in this project. And as Yashwant alluded to, the 4 venues, we had large teams of volunteers who we had to bring up to speed with the SK, but they really helped deliver the message we wanted to deliver, and on that scale as well, thousands of people a day. So I think you want to start first by trying to find a good team of volunteers to help you out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yashwant, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I would echo that. We found that, and just this there's connections that we made with the different institutions in the country. We were surprised with how much cooperation and interest we got from the different colleges and universities and institutions.
Thank you. Teresa, I see that you're still there. Do you have a top tip? Yeah.
Top tip. So for events, I would also say the same thing. So you need really the support from everyone in your team, support from supervisors and also from colleagues, because if you are the only one, you can never do it. So this is, for example, one tip for also an event like the Mouse Day that we are doing.
Thank you. Jacinta, what about you? What's your top tip?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
If you were to give a top tip from what you've been learning while doing your podcast to someone who would like to start their own podcast, what would that be?
Just get started. Yeah, just get started.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I think we're running 1 minute late, so that's not too bad. I'd like to thank all the speakers. I learned a lot, and it's great to see everyone's motivations. And thank you also to the audience. So thank you.